There's a number that changes everything. Not your salary, not your net worth, not the value of your house. Your invested assets, liquid, working, compounding. $1 million. And here's what nobody prepares you for. It's not the number itself that changes things. It's what happens to the way you see every financial decision for the rest of your life once you've crossed it. The math shifts. The psychology shifts. The entire game you thought you were playing turns out to have a completely different set of rules at this level. Rules that almost nobody talks about because most people never get close enough to need them. I'm Andy, and this is Andy Explains Money. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what changes when your investment portfolio crosses $1 million. Not the motivational version, not the highlight reel, the real version. The one that includes the things that surprise people, the things that feel uncomfortable, and the things that make every dollar you put in before you get there worth more than you currently think it is. Let's start with something that will reframe the entire conversation. Most people think about the $1 million milestone the wrong way. They imagine it as a destination, a finish line with a ribbon stretched across it. You cross it, you feel something, and then life gets easier. And there's a version of that which is true. But the deeper truth is that $1 million invested isn't a destination at all. It's the moment the game changes direction. Here's what I mean. For every dollar you invest before you hit $1 million, you are the engine. You are the one pushing the boulder up the hill. Your contributions, your discipline, your sacrifices, your consistency. Every paycheck, every skipped vacation, every boring Saturday where you did nothing exciting but your portfolio balance quietly ticked upward. That was all you, your effort, your input. At $1 million invested, something structurally changes. The portfolio starts pulling its own weight in a way that is genuinely difficult to comprehend until you experience it. At a historically average market return of around 7% annually after inflation, a $1 million portfolio generates approximately $70,000 per year in growth. $70,000, without you doing anything. That's more than the median individual income in the United States. Your portfolio, at that level, is earning more than most people earn at their jobs. And it does it on Saturdays. It does it on holidays. It does it while you're asleep. It does it whether you're having the best year of your career or the worst. This is the first thing that changes. Your relationship with your own labor. Before $1 million, every dollar you earn at work matters enormously to your financial trajectory. Miss a year of contributions and you feel it. Take a pay cut and the ripple runs through your retirement timeline. Your financial future is tightly coupled to your professional performance. After $1 million, that coupling starts to loosen. Not completely, not immediately, but meaningfully. The portfolio becomes a co-contributor to your wealth. And every year that passes, its contribution grows larger while yours, in relative terms, grows smaller. This isn't a reason to stop working or stop contributing. It's a reason to understand that the rules of the game have genuinely changed. Let me introduce you to two people. Marcus is 44 years old. He has spent 20 years building a career in supply chain management, earning a solid income, living below his means, and investing consistently. Last year, his portfolio crossed $1 million for the first time. Here's what Marcus expected to feel. Relief, a sense of arrival, maybe a quiet pride that he had done the hard thing and made it work. Here's what Marcus actually experienced. Disorientation. Because the $1 million didn't feel like a reward for past behavior, it felt like a new set of responsibilities he hadn't been briefed on. Suddenly, the questions changed. It was no longer about whether he was saving enough. It was about whether his asset allocation still made sense at this level, whether his tax strategy was optimized, or whether he was hemorrhaging money to the IRS in ways that only matter when the numbers are large, whether he needed to think differently about risk, whether the approach that got him here was still the right approach going forward. The climb and the summit require completely different equipment, and almost nobody tells you that. Marcus is not unusual. The psychological experience of crossing this threshold catches most people off guard precisely because the financial media spends so much energy helping people get to $1 million and almost no time explaining what actually happens when they do. So let's talk about what specifically changes. And I want to be precise here, Because this is where most discussions get vague when they need to be concrete. The first change is how you experience market volatility. Before $1 million invested, a 10% market correction means your portfolio dropped by less than $100,000. If you're earlier in your journey, it might mean a drop of $20,000 or $30,000. That's painful to see on a screen, but it's recoverable quickly, especially when your ongoing contributions are still doing meaningful work. At $1 million, a 10% correction is $100,000. Gone. In weeks, sometimes days. Your monthly contributions haven't changed, but they now look almost irrelevant against the backdrop of what the market can take away in a single rough quarter. Someone contributing $2,000 a month watches the market erase 50 months of contributions in a correction that lasts 6 weeks. This changes how you feel about volatility in a way that's genuinely hard to simulate in advance. It's not that the math is worse. Actually, the math is fine. Corrections at this level are still temporary. Long-term compounding still works. The logic hasn't changed. But the emotional weight of watching large numbers fluctuate is something your nervous system responds to differently than your brain does. And knowing that doesn't make it easier. The people who navigate this well are the ones who did the psychological work before they arrived. They decided in advance what volatility meant to them at this level. They stress-tested their own reaction to large paper losses and adjusted their asset allocation accordingly, not based on what maximized returns in a spreadsheet, but based on what they could genuinely sustain without making panic-driven decisions that would permanently damage their trajectory. The second change is your relationship with taxes. Below a certain portfolio size, your tax situation is relatively straightforward. You contribute to your accounts, your employer withholds what they withhold, and once a year, you file. Taxes are an annoyance, not a strategic variable. At $1 million invested and growing, taxes become one of the most important levers in your entire financial life. The difference between a tax-efficient strategy and a tax-indifferent one at this level isn't a few $100s. It can be tens of thousands of dollars annually. Capital gains taxes, dividend distributions, required minimum distributions, Roth conversion windows, asset location, meaning which investments live in which account types for maximum tax efficiency. These aren't topics for people who like complexity. They're topics that become genuinely worth your time once your portfolio reaches a level where the numbers justify the attention. Here's a specific example. Imagine two people with identical $1 million portfolios generating identical returns. One of them has done zero tax planning. The other has been strategic about asset location, holding tax-inefficient assets like bonds and REITs inside their tax-advantaged accounts, and tax-efficient assets like index funds in their taxable accounts. Over 10 years, the difference in after-tax wealth between those two people can be staggering. Not because they invested differently, but because of where they held their investments. The $1 million milestone is the point where ignoring this kind of optimization starts costing you real money. Not theoretical money. Real money that you earned and could keep. The third change is what happens to your sense of financial identity. This one is harder to quantify, but it might be the most significant change of all. Most people who are building toward $1 million carry a quiet background anxiety about money, even when things are going well. Not a constant panic, more like a low hum. The awareness that a bad enough string of events could destabilize everything. Job loss, medical crisis, market crash, divorce. Any of these could derail the plan. And so the plan requires constant tending, constant attention, constant discipline. Once the portfolio crosses $1 million and you understand what compound growth actually does at that level, something in that background hum quiets. Not completely, and not permanently, because new concerns enter the picture. But the specific anxiety of not having enough, the fear that the whole thing is fragile, that one wrong move ends it, that anxiety loses most of its power. What replaces it is different for different people. For some, it's clarity. For others, it's a kind of stillness. For Marcus, it was what he described as a shift in his time horizon. Before the $1 million, he thought about money in terms of months and years. After the $1 million, he started thinking about it in terms of decades and generations. That shift in time horizon changes everything it touches. Career decisions, spending decisions, risk decisions. How you think about your children's financial futures. What you're actually optimizing for. When your invested assets can sustain themselves and grow without requiring your constant input, you stop managing survival and start making choices. There's something else that changes that almost nobody talks about, and I want to spend real time on it because it catches people genuinely off guard. At $1 million invested, your biggest financial risks change completely. On the way to $1 million, your primary financial risks are behavioral. The risk that you stop investing during a downturn. The risk that you inflate your lifestyle faster than your income grows. The risk that you raid your investments for something that felt important at the time. The risk of not starting, not continuing, not staying consistent. These are the risks that destroy most people's financial trajectories. They are fundamentally risks of behavior and discipline. After $1 million, the behavioral risks don't disappear, but a new category of risk moves to the front of the line. Sequence of returns risk. Here's what that means. If you're still in accumulation mode, growing your portfolio toward a future goal, the order in which the market's returns arrive doesn't matter much. A bad year followed by good years, or good years followed by a bad year, ultimately produces similar outcomes if you stay the course. But the moment you start drawing from that portfolio, either in early retirement or as a supplement to your income, the sequence matters enormously. A severe market downturn in the early years of withdrawal can permanently damage a portfolio in ways that the long-term average return doesn't capture. Imagine two people. Both retire with $1 million. Both average 7% annually over their retirement. But one of them experiences a 40% market crash in year 2, while the other experiences that same crash in year 20. The person who faces the crash early, while drawing down the portfolio, ends up with dramatically less money over time, not because the average return was different, but because they were selling shares at depressed prices when the portfolio was still large enough for it to matter. This is why the investment strategy that built the million is not necessarily the right strategy for protecting and distributing it. The tools change. The risk management changes. The entire orientation shifts from offense to a more nuanced combination of offense and defense. Now, let me give you the number that makes all of this feel real. At $1 million invested, growing at 7% annually, your portfolio doubles in roughly 10 years, without a single additional contribution, without a raise, without a promotion, without a side hustle, without doing anything other than not touching it. $2 million in 10 years, from $1 million, by doing nothing. Now here's why that number should change how you think about every financial decision you make before you get there. Every dollar you invest at 30 has approximately 30 to 35 years of compounding ahead of it. A single dollar invested at 30 becomes roughly $7.60 by age 65 at 7% annually. Every dollar you invest at 40 has 25 years. That same dollar becomes roughly $5.40. Every dollar you invest at 50 has 15 years. That same dollar becomes approximately $2.75. The time value of investment isn't just a compound interest formula. It's the difference between a portfolio that takes care of itself at $1 million and a portfolio that takes care of itself at $2 or $3 million, because you ran out of time for the compounding to do the heavy work. The $1 million threshold changes the way you think about money because it's the first level where the math is undeniable. You can see it. You can feel it. The portfolio's growth in a good year exceeds your annual contributions by a multiple. The engine has become larger than the person running it. Now I want to talk about something that runs counter to what most financial content will tell you. Reaching $1 million invested does not solve your psychology. It reveals it. The financial insecurity that drives most people's problematic spending habits. The impulse to buy things that signal success because success doesn't feel stable yet. The difficulty sitting with delayed gratification. The anxiety that makes financial risk feel personal. These things don't evaporate because a number on a screen changed. What the million does is remove the external justification for those patterns. When you were building toward financial security, you could tell yourself that the anxiety made sense, that the pressure was real, that the urgency was appropriate. At $1 million, the external pressure is largely gone, and some people discover, for the first time, that the pressure was never really external. I've talked to people who reached this milestone and immediately began finding new financial anxieties to replace the old ones. They worried that $1 million wasn't really enough. They compared themselves to people with $5 million and felt behind. They shifted the goalposts in ways that kept the background hum exactly where it had always been. The million doesn't fix the underlying relationship with money. What it does is give you an extraordinarily clear mirror. Whatever remains, after the external pressure has been removed, is the internal work that no portfolio balance can do for you. The people who thrive at this level are the ones who do both. They build the portfolio and they examine what they believe about money, about security, about identity, about enough. Not as a philosophical exercise, as a practical one. Because at $1 million, the largest remaining threats to your financial well-being are almost entirely psychological. So let's talk about what you should actually do differently once you hit this milestone. The first thing is to reassess your asset allocation with fresh eyes. The allocation that made sense when you were aggressively accumulating in your 30s is probably not the right allocation for $1 million portfolio in your 40s or 50s. Not because you should become conservative for the sake of it, but because your actual risk profile has changed. You have more to protect. You also have different time horizons for different portions of the money. A portion might be genuinely long-term. Another portion might be needed within 10 years. These require different strategies, and pretending otherwise is expensive. The second thing is to get serious about tax optimization. This is the point where a few hours with a fee-only financial advisor or a CPA who specializes in investment taxation can pay for themselves many times over. Not because you need someone to manage your money, but because the tax efficiency of $1 million portfolio, compounded over decades, is a variable worth understanding precisely. Every dollar you unnecessarily hand to the IRS at this level is a dollar that doesn't compound for the next 20 years. That's not a small number. The third thing is to define what the portfolio is actually for. This sounds obvious, but most people skip it entirely. Is this retirement at a specific age? Is it optionality, the ability to leave a job you hate without financial terror? Is it a foundation for generational wealth? Is it a bridge to a different kind of work? Each of these goals implies a different strategy. Without a clear purpose, the $1 million just sits there being large, and you find yourself managing it reactively instead of intentionally. The money is ready to go to work for a specific future. Your job is to tell it which one. The fourth thing is to resist the lifestyle inflation that this milestone can trigger. There's a version of celebrating $1 million that involves buying things to match how it sounds. This is almost always a mistake. Not because you don't deserve nice things, but because the behaviors and decisions that built the million are exactly the behaviors and decisions that will build the next million in half the time. The math is unambiguous. Your second million comes faster than your first. Your third comes faster than your second. The compounding that felt slow and distant in the early years becomes the most powerful force in your financial life at this level. Abandoning the habits that activated it, in celebration of what they produced, is trading the factory for one product. Here's the final thing I want to leave you with. The $1 million investment milestone is not a reward for past behavior. It's not a destination. It's not even a goal, really. It's a threshold. It's the point at which the mathematical reality of compounding becomes visible and undeniable in your own life. The point where your money is working harder than you are. The point where the risks change, the questions change, and the game changes. Most people spend their financial lives trying to reach it without ever thinking clearly about what it means when they do. They imagine arrival, and they get transformation instead. They imagine relief, and they get a new kind of clarity that requires new kinds of decisions. The people who navigate this milestone well share one thing in common. They didn't treat the million as the end of the financial conversation. They treated it as the beginning of a more honest one, a conversation about what they actually wanted, what was actually enough, what they were actually building toward beyond the next number. Because here's the truth that the milestone reveals, maybe more clearly than anything that came before it. Money, at this level, stops being about survival. It stops being about security. And it becomes about something harder and more personal. Choice. What you choose to do with your time, what you choose to build, what you choose to give, what you choose to become. Now that the financial pressure that shaped so many of your previous decisions has finally, genuinely, quietly released its grip. That's not a financial question anymore. That's the question. And the million is just the point where you finally have the space to hear it. I'm Andy. This is Andy Explains Money. If this gave you something to think about, there's a lot more where that came from.